This is the penultimate session for this weekend, and the panel is going to be discussing a question that's come up at every single session I've been in so far, which is how do we get a new left organisation? And we're very lucky today to have two excellent speakers to introduce this topic and for us to have a discussion. So I'll let them each speak for 12 minutes maximum, and then we'll open up for some discussion. So I'll introduce our first speaker, who is here on my left, Andrew Feinstein, who I think many of you will know Andrew, who is very prominent in the anti-war movement and also, with his work campaigning against the arms trade. Andrew's a former ANC MP in South Africa and most recently, in the last general election, stood against Keir Starmer in Holborn and St Pancras. So welcome, Andrew, to the stand.
That one. Thank you so much, and thank you for being here. And thank you, as always, to Counterfire for the invitation. We look upon the recent local election results through the prism of the liberal media, because that's what they try and force us to do. And it's really important not to lose sight of the positives. A huge positive of which we're going to be talking about in a moment by what happened in Preston and in other parts of the country. We should also bear in mind another positive, that our local MP in this area, and if you're not from the constituency, welcome to hell. Our local MP is in the process of destroying the Labour Party. Now, a few years ago, I would have been a bit upset about the destruction of the Labour Party. Today, I think it's an incredibly positive development. Because there is nothing good left of the Labour Party. And why is that? Well, our local MP, whose name we shall not mention, remains involved, not enabling and facilitating, but involved in an ongoing genocide, in which, while we sit here, dozens of innocent Palestinians will be slaughtered by Israel. And what is he doing about that? He continues to send weapons from the UK and the United States of America on an almost daily basis to Israel. He continues to allow the Royal Air Force to fly more intelligence flights over Gaza than are being flown by the Israeli Air Force. Let that sink in for a moment. Britain is flying more intelligence flights over Gaza to provide information to the IDF than the Israeli Air Force. And that is being done by our Member of Parliament. And we will never forget, and we will never forgive. And just like the MP for Hampstead and Highgate, one Tulip Siddiq, who has an arrest warrant issued for her by the Bangladeshi government, and she is a dual citizen of Bangladesh, so too should our MP, our Prime Minister, have an arrest warrant for his arrest because he should spend the rest of his life in a jail cell in The Hague. But the genocide is only part of his doing the bidding of his bosses, who are his billionaire donors. What he is doing for them is he is turning public money, our money, into private profits. We see it in all of the utilities. We see it in the costs that we pay when we go to the supermarket. We see it in every single aspect of our lives. What he is doing is eviscerating our public services because those are for incidental people who are only supposed to turn up every few years to vote for them. We have no use to him outside of that, and he barely knows that we exist. This is rip-off Britain. that our MP has followed the Tory party in turning into a tragedy. And that is why the other positive that we have to take from the local elections is the fact that Keir Starmer and Morgan McSweeney and the corrupt billionaires who they serve are destroying the Labour Party, which means the two main parties of the establishment, which are virtually indistinguishable, are in the process of being annihilated. Of course, what that leaves us with is an appalling party of the far right. And we obviously cannot avoid that. But I would argue that there is no point just creating another political party, because the vast majority of people in this country who don't come to our meetings on the weekend, who aren't marching, are fed up with all politics and all politicians. So we have to do something different. And what is that different? Today in Britain, we are seeing, like we have the Preston independence, the Liverpool independence, the Southport independence, majority in Newcastle, the about-to-be-announced Camden independence, and many, many others across the country. We need to bring all of these local community initiatives together in a national movement. And then we need to ensure that every metre of this country, every community, has its own local organization that is driven by the community for the community. And then, once we've spent a small amount of time doing that organizing, we need to have a launch congress for a new national party. And why do it in that way? Because if it is not democratic and accountable from the outset, it will be just another political party. And this country cannot afford that. We have an opportunity, which might be a once in a multiple generations opportunity, to build something that could change the face of British politics forever and return some modicum of decency, of justice, of equality to this country, because those values have all been squashed and stumped upon. So how do we deal with the threat from reform? I spent many of my formative political years in South Africa having to try and persuade white right-wing South Africans that Nelson Mandela wasn't a communist ogre who was about to take away their homes, their cars, their swimming pools, rape their daughters and wives, and drive what remains of them into the sea. And it wasn't easy. But the reason that the South African transition was relatively bloodless was because thousands and thousands of us spent huge swathes of our time engaging with ordinary people who didn't think the way we think. And that is what we have to do. So when we talk about creating local organization, it has to be in those areas where there are not a lot of people who think like we do, who are involved in the same discussions that we're involved in. We have to take our arguments, which are logical, rational, and incredibly powerful, and we have to persuade people. And the best way to persuade people, in my opinion, is to engage with them as people. And that's what we have to be doing in Clacton, in Northampton, in everywhere in the country that thinks that Nigel Farage and his bunch of fascists are in any way a part of the solution rather than a major part of the problem. And they are not just fascists, but frauds to boot. People need to understand that the day after the Brexit result, Nigel Farage was queuing outside the German embassy because he wanted to ensure that Brexit didn't affect him, but he also knew that his German wife was about to divorce him, which is why he was in such a hurry. They need to know that he spent 21 years as a banker in the city and know exactly how much he made. And this is the problem with centre-left parties around the world. They avoid engaging with ordinary people who don't immediately think like they do. And we on the left, because we are not the centre-left, the centre-left to all intents and purposes is dead, and we should celebrate its funeral. We are the left. And what we have to do differently is we have to engage people, not wait until our orange one, Nigel Farage, is in power. Now, I'm going to end off by apologizing. I know that people are very frustrated, but I want to assure you, and I can't say more than this, there have been extensive discussions, conversations, engagements going on the left for a few months now, and they are intensifying. And the reason I'm apologizing for this is because I wish they were just open and transparent conversations. But there are people who are in very sensitive positions that makes it very difficult to make public some of the conversations that are taking place. But what I can say to you is that we, together, not as some small group of leaders somewhere, not as some people who think they're self-appointed saviors, but together as communities, we are going to create in this country a national movement that, if strategically appropriate, will decide to become a national party before the next general election. And we are going to introduce to this country a totally different form of politics in which anybody who has the honor of being elected to represent their community has no choice but to remain totally accountable to and an integral part of that community. And we have an example. You know, we look at the world. We look at the mess that is the United States of America. We look at the genocidal mess that is most of Western Europe and the European Union. We look at our defense budgets that are going to increase by £15.4 billion a year in 2027. And we think, oh my goodness, there is no hope. But let's not lose sight of those examples where there is hope. Like the Belgian Workers' Party, which has gone from a little grouping, some might even say a cult, of a few hundred people to have the second most representatives in all of Belgium's incredibly complicated legislatures. And how have they done that? By ensuring that their representatives give a percentage of their salaries earned as representatives back to their communities, so that careerists are immediately excluded. 2, by not contesting an election in a community until they have been present and working with that community for at least 2 years. And 3, by ensuring that it is the communities that hold representatives to account. And this might seem very difficult for us to do in a country like Britain. But let me conclude by saying, many of you who've heard me speak before are used to me finishing my speeches with what my former boss Nelson Mandela said about Palestine and the Palestinian struggle. But I'm going to finish today by telling you something that he said about our struggle in South Africa. He was asked how he had got through 22 years in an apartheid jail. He was then moved on shore for the last 5 years. And he said, because I have faith in our people, and I have faith in the people of the world. And yes, it seems incredibly difficult what we need to do, but it's only impossible until it's done. Thanks.